keep an eye on that. Lara Hyams, you are in the Wentworth electorate. Tell us first of all where and how news is being received there of Malcolm Turnbull's imminent fate.
Well, Greg, this is the suburb of Double Bay, and we've just got Malcolm Turnbull's office merely about 200 metres away. He's obviously had a strong affinity with this area. He spent a lot of time growing up here. He did have a tilt at this seat in the early 80s for pre-selection, but was unsuccessful, returned in 2004 and managed to become the member for the area. So he has a long association here. A lot of the people that know him have a lot of trust in him. His backers have been long supporters of him. But this morning it seems to come down to two categories of people. There are those which sympathise with him and those which have been very critical of him. The sympathisers feel that what has transpired in the last few days has been almost un-Australian, is what some of the words that I've heard today, in the sense that perhaps the Conservative Party has been balking at some of those poor news poll figures, and they don't feel that due process has been carried out because he was the one that they voted for, and these are the members that expected him to carry out a full term. On the other side, there are those which have been critical mainly of those two key policies that we had, corporate tax cuts and the national energy guarantee as well. Those which have been quite critical of him see him as unable to negotiate properly with the Conservatives. But it's interesting because the sympathisers over here see him capitulating to the Conservative base. Attempts to make those deals have been unsuccessful, so they do really feel in a little bit of a bind to that. In terms of whether Peter Dutton would get some traction here, a lot of the voices that I've spoken to this morning would not back him. Their support of the Liberal Party would not change, but they don't see Peter Dutton as the one that can perhaps win the next election or be a good leader. But interestingly, I spoke to a couple of business people around this area, and even though Scott Morrison is emerging as another name that has been thrown into the ring, they see him as untrustworthy because it was only within the last 24 hours that he was backing the leader, Malcolm Turnbull. So the sentiment here is very mixed and very divided, and they're hoping that this issue will be resolved as soon as possible.
Yeah, that's interesting. A very comprehensive summary of the views you've canvassed there, Lara. Here's one without notice to you, though. Was anyone asked, did we get any canvassing of whether Malcolm Turnbull should be sticking around as their local member for Wentworth? I know it's a more intricate question, really. We're not there yet, but any fondness you detected for their local member and what's happened to him under these circumstances?
Well, the short answer is yes. People would like to see him represent their views here. He does have that long-standing relationship. There is that element of trust here. We did have a couple of people tell me that they were impressed with the way that the gay marriage vote managed to get over the line here. So that's something that he has come good on what he said he would do in terms of making sure that plebiscite happened. The issue is, though, that the critics here feel that he doesn't have that conviction. They were promised a range of policies and a raft of actions that he would carry out, but that hasn't been followed through. But in terms of representing the electorate, there is a fondness about him here. There is a strong affinity. He's obviously been here many, many years, so there is that trust. But I haven't heard anything too disparaging of Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull today. OK, and
you did note, just finally, Lara Hyams, you did note in your opening summary attitudes towards Peter Dutton. I'm taking it from what you said that this isn't exactly Peter Dutton heartland there in Double Bay, Sydney.
That's right, Greg, it's not. So obviously Peter Dutton has a strong Conservative base. Here it's a little bit more moderate. But a couple of people who didn't wish to be interviewed on camera but did express support for Peter Dutton, when I asked them what policies and what platforms that they would support him doing, the only issue that came out was immigration. So he has been perceived as a person who is tough on immigration. I put to them issues on energy, climate, also in terms of economics, and a lot of those people were very ambivalent in giving some response to that, but he has been perceived as a very strong performer in the area of immigration, and the supporters for Peter Dutton here were anticipating that he'd be very good on that front.
All right, Lara Himes, thank you so much for that summary. Interesting to get the perspectives there from Double Bay, and although we're not predicting resignations and by-elections, the eyes of Australia may be on Wentworth, the Wentworth electorate, for some time, as Malcolm Turnbull's political career runs out at some point within the next 8 or 9 months anyway. For viewers on ABC television coverage, just noting that the Senate is still sitting here. It's